I was a database analyst, systems analyst, requirements analyst. So I have a lot of experience about manipulating data and about looking at capability and forecasting benefits. So what we want to have is we want to have an inventory of everybody that's interned in the cemetery. But our effort today, with this, I have a separate file of all the stones. And I'll be able to link that to people because we're not going to be able to determine what grave number somebody is in. At best, all we can do is we can capture the stone, to what section and lot number it is, and that won't be all that easy either. And then also, because ultimately, we've captured the deed number for the lot, and that's important to me because I have well over 80 of my relatives and ancestors that are interned in this cemetery, as well as DCR has all the state photographs, and they took photographs of the properties and all that stuff. So we have the book and page number for when those properties were taken. So those are those, even if you have relatives that own property, you'll be able to look up the deeds of online and all that kind of stuff. As well, there's all kinds of other different benefits that will derive from our efforts. So I'm just touching some of the basic samples of this, and I can assure you that every second that you do doing a good job of documenting and all that stuff and sharing it, it's going to pay big dividends in the future and those that follow.
Right. So I'm just going to talk about cleaning and trying to read the stones because that's the key. I do this for a living. I clean and repair gravestones. Everybody has kind of their own idea of what's proper. I try to follow the Secretary of the Interior. So, and ladybugs. Ooh, ain't my face, sorry. So, don't use anything on the stone that you can't rub on your skin or drink. That's kind of my main claim. So, water, 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 and a brush. It's not, it scratches me a little bit, but that's just like a dry skin. But a soft nylon brush. I picked these up at the dollar store for $2. You can dry wipe those blankets off pretty easily. If it's really bad and it gets like down in the letters, I carry craft sticks with me. We used to call these orange sticks. So push back and keep nice points to get in the letters. Wood and plastic are good. Metal is bad. Anything metal is going to scratch the stone. So you're going to break this before you hurt the stone. You're going to wear this down before you hurt the stone.
Where do you find the little pointers? Where do you find those?
Next to the fingernail polish remover.
Yeah. Put them separately? I've seen
But you know,
Sally Beauty Supply.
You know,
Or Target.
You know what? Every time you order Chinese food, tell them, yes, you want those chopsticks.
Oh.
And you put them in your graveyard bag. And it's,
Okay.
So anything like that, I have a friend who sharpens them, an electric pencil sharpener.
Oh, okay.
So, because they wear down pretty quickly. These two can dig in and you can break them and get a point if you need it. And this fits in your back pocket. I mean, I walk around with these most of the time in my back pocket. Once again, plastic good, metal bad. And the dollar store, this is the ocean lot. And you get like 3 in a pack for $1.25 or something. And they'll wear down. Most of mine are about this long. They do wear down a little bit, but they don't scratch the stones. And when you're on a monument that has that really mossy looking stuff, I mean, this stuff just takes it right off. You can do it dry.
And we're allowed to do that here?
Okay, so we're going to get down to the proper beach here. Because I think there's a little push to have things done here right now. There's a little pushback. That's just the way things are. All the land, all the trees, all the roadways, all the like pathways, everything belongs to DCR. Gravestones forever and always belong to the family, to descendants. In that, DCR could charge you for repairing your stone because it really is your responsibility. So you should be allowed to go in and clean your own stone, but they're just trying to, you know, keep everybody safe. Let me just say this first. So safety is the most important thing. About 2 years ago, we lost a man in Massachusetts on Memorial Day planting flowers in front of his mother. Went to get up, put his hand on the stone, and pulled it down on top. And that happens a lot. About a dozen people a year lose their lives in the cemetery. That's not counting the injured people.
I'm not touching those.
And I'm going to show you one right now and why we would want everyone to be safe. I actually am doing some work up in Belchertown in the Center Cemetery, and a woman walked in and she, her and her husband, and they both said, "We're so glad to see you doing this work." Their grandson just a year ago had walked in the cemetery that's like across from this, where, you know, their house or whatever, and grabbed a hold of a small stone and fell, broke his hip. He survived, but they are dangerous, and really big ones are even more dangerous. So I mean, there is a reason why we do it. But to lightly brush it or something to be able to read it is one thing. To scrape it off a little bit. These to help. Okay, but this also, I just want to point out, has a diffuser, it has a gold shield, it has the silver side, and it has a black side. So if it's too light or too bright, you can shade it too to get your photo. But you can see without the light, now we got some sunlight. And then if I put that light on there, you can make that so much easier to read.
Is there a certain time of day that's better than others?
Depends on which, okay.
What direction you're facing.
So, all stones up until about the 1820s should be facing west. If they're not facing west, they've been moved. And we know this because you had a headstone that faced west, you had a footstone that faced east, you were laid out like a bed in between them. It was a headboard and a footboard. And the reading was on, the lettering was on the outside, so you never stood on the body. And on Judgment Day, all those people will rise up and face the morning sun. If it's not facing that way, the body's not facing that way, and that's. But after the Great Awakening, there were some changes. Some stayed still kind of following that, and then we got into garden cemeteries where you followed the way the path was laid out, and there wasn't that designation. But so sometimes I have to take all my headstone pictures in the morning and all my footstone pictures in the afternoon. Of course, noon, straight out. 2 o'clock, it starts to get, this is autumn, our sun's dropped down a little bit, so it changes. But these make it really, and we used to carry mirrors out too, and some people still carry mirrors out to do this. I just find this is lightweight. It pops up, I can throw it in my trunk, I can bring it out, I can use it. I can use it one-handedly, sometimes poorly, but you know, so that works pretty well. The flashlight, like you saw, okay, B, out of my face. Is it working there? Can help too. So I gave you a list of, a little list there of different things. Now, materials, I just want to go over. So the black old stones are slate, usually. They can be schist, which is really bumpy, just looks like a rock. and or sandstone. But I think there might be a couple sandstones. Do you know?
I think so. Some of my
But not very many, I would think. So the slate, and then
Is black.
the white stones. I know this doesn't look white, but this white stone here would be marble. And it's hard to tell sometimes. You have to kind of find the white spots to know. They're usually a thicker type of marker. They're usually 1820s and after. So that's kind of, but the marble get covered with this lichen, so they don't look as white as they used to. Some of them can start looking like slate. Slate's usually thin layers. And then granite, which is mostly what we find here. Marble and granite. And granite comes in all different colors, but it's mostly a speckly kind of looking thing. That's granite, that's granite, that's granite. Almost all of those are granite or marble. Granite, that one's marble. So that's materials. When you go to fill out a form, if it's asking you what material it is. And then style. So in the beginning, mostly, well, in the beginning when you were buried, you got a board stuck in the ground with your name painted on it. And then by the time the money was saved up, and they got a carver, and they ordered a stone, and they got it in there, it would be this tablet form. There's about a third of the height of this stone in the ground. And it's an in-the-ground monument. So that was kind of the earliest. Then we got into, let me find one. But it would be a tablet that's set in a base. And that was like the next step up, the next evolution we took. I'm trying to look for one. I think the bases sink underground, but it was like the next style up. And those are what we call above ground. Then the rest of them are what we call die and base. This is called a die, D-I-E, just like he died, and the base. And it doesn't matter if it's this in granite or whatever style shape, these are also called a die and base. These have an added piece that we call this section here, or like on that one, this middle base, we call it a plinth, but it should be on the list. And then we have flat markers like this. And individual these get called various things, and you'll have to determine what you want to call them. A lot of times in the monument industry, they're called thumb markers, because they are intended to stick up out of the ground just a little bit. They're usually related with a main monument. You can see there's some over here and some over there. That's marking the actual graves of these people for this monument. So there's different styles. Even this, it's really kind of a flush. It's just not been put flush in the ground.
So the one right next to it and that are still considered the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're considered flat or
flat or flush marker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for something like this, how do we report them? Because there's a monument there does it have any names on it?
Oh yes, it does.
Okay.
George.
Oh, there's all kinds of names.
George.
But I mean, they're all related, right? Between, these markers and...
The names on here should match up with those thumb markers there.
Okay. I mean, in terms of like capturing that on a form.
Right. So, you might write that it's a monument, a 3-piece monument, because you're going to want to mention how many sections are in the monument, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 markers. And then you can mark down separately on the side or however you want to enter that stuff. A lot of times you end up with single entries for each one. That way you can upload that information or do whatever that way.
But it might make sense to add a field on the form about the length and the description of the monument, but we'd want to have individual sheets on every individual. That's contingent that you can read them.
Right. So then, I think I covered everything on the marker shapes. This is an obelisk. This is an obelisk. It can all fall under monument. We call those pedestals when they're like squat, like Kendall over here. But you can just call them a monument, and you can tell how many sections. Poor Jocelyn is missing the top urn. There's probably an urn that's set up on top of there. And you'll be able to see the whole. Before I find those wasps.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. Oh, okay, yeah, there should have been an urn on top
Right,
of this.
right.
Okay.
So, the way that these are put together, and monuments like this, a lot of times these have metal pins. They'll have a metal pin, 2 metal pins, just right there, holding these elements together. These won't have pins. They're sitting on little shims on the corners. And so, if it loses its mortar, as you can see, you can't see any mortar here, and you should see some mortar. These are also missing their mortar. And don't do this at home. But you can see sometimes they'll feel loose on the base. That'll be a condition of them. So, in safety, I can't stress enough, they do fall on people, even if it doesn't catch your ankle or something like that. These will tend to move off if they get sunken on one side. They'll start to slide off, so you have to be careful. There'll be a point where it stood in that position, it seems, for like 20 years it's been moving this way. One day, I don't know, the squirrel jumped on it and it's over.
Well, one thing that Tamara shared with us at our Board of Directors meeting on the 14th of September was about the safety issue and about the liability, that if a stone should happen to fall on somebody within a certain, that the family is responsible for this time, and then after a certain amount of years, the owner of the cemetery.
Well, there's no family. If it's considered abandoned and the town or the state's taken ownership of that monument, then they become responsible.
Now, is there a process where they take ownership, or is it?
No, it's just if they can't find family, then they would be responsible. It's usually 75 to 100 years. A lot of times, we had small cemeteries that started as part of a meeting house, and then when the Great Awakening happened, and we all kind of said, well, separation of church and state. So the cemetery was moved out of town, and it's not next to the church anymore, and it became a different thing. So then the town would take care of it, but families had cemeteries that maybe they let other families, bury in. And those, the families have died off, they're gone, and this thing's sitting in the woods somewhere at the back of the farm, then the town usually takes ownership.
And this stuff is discussed in Mass General Laws, Chapter 114.
He knows this stuff. So I just want to show you what I mean. I'll just kind of go down the list of conditions there. I think the first one is just ambient dirt or biological growth. I think that's going to get checked off on every form you fill out pretty much. Okay. Leaning. Leaning is leaning forward or leaning backwards. Tilted is like the teapot. So if you kind of tilted like the teapot, leaning over. Stones that are leaning forward or backwards are at much more risk than a stone that's tilted. If it's tilted, it's got this much room to break. If it's leaning, it's only got that much room to break. So that kind of comes into the priority, but it's a way of describing what's happening with the stone. If it's sunken, some of these, the bases will sink way down and it'll get leaning like or tilted like this one over here. Part of it's sunken down right now. It's not loose on its base, but it is leaning, tilted.
Is it important to measure how many degrees it might be leaning forward or backward?
So, yes, the more it leans, the more danger it's at. You can get a little gauge at the hardware store that'll tell you, oh, it's 13 degrees off center or something. But if it's leaning over a lot, then put 50%. Leaning over just a little bit, put 5 degrees. You know, you kind of can judge without the meter, but you can get a meter that tells you exactly.
If you go to section 19, you'll see a lot of them leaning. And then also marker 2066, which is General Joseph Hooker. His is leaning quite a bit. And
clear.
so, you know, it's simply stated is that I would think those would be a priority to get fixed because they're historical purposes too.
So the one thing I think I didn't point out was footstones, which I don't know if there's any actual footstones in here. Like I explained before, you had a headstone and a footstone. That went on for a while. But I don't think there's any footstones in here. I think those just got...
You'll see a lot of veterans markers that are, you know, the level ones.
Right, like the brass ones?
Yes, or aluminum.
Bronze.
Bronze, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do the footstones have the name on it too, or is it
No.
just assumed
The
that it goes
footstones,
with...
the footstones usually only have initials.
Okay.
So a lot of people are confused. Sometimes they would get moved and put in the row with the headstones, and they would just think, oh, this poor guy, JC, he couldn't afford to get anything put on his grave.
Yeah, oh, right, right.
And they didn't know that it was, you know, Joseph Collins right next to him and that the initials kind of match. So,
Yeah, okay.
but if a footstone is leaning, okay, you're going to end up with mower damage. It's just what happens. They're mowing how many acres here, and they have to keep going around. It gets hit. But it's not at a real risk because it's probably not going to break. It's not going to fall very far. But the bigger the stone and the more pieces, the more it's going to topple. That slate stone that I pointed out, it's a little bit taller. If it was leaning, it's a little bit thinner. It might break sooner. Mm-hmm. But if you have something like this that's multi-piece and it starts leaning, a couple things happen. What happens is if it starts to lean on, say, this corner, all the water that hits here, and most of the water that hits here, comes down. This will all start to drain. And then it just starts drilling away. Then it's just a matter of time. That all the water, and then it leans more and more water, and it doesn't fix itself. So, but those are not attached together, and that becomes a really dangerous kind of stone.
Oh, they're just set on each other.
They're just set. They have little pieces of lead in between there.
Okay.
So that, if I was writing this up, I didn't see if it's leaning. Doesn't appear to be.
Just has biologic activity.
And it's missing its mortar. Just because it's, that's the general.
Back in 2012, she did a lot of work here. I think you repaired about, 28 stones and cleaned them?
Oh yeah, I'm not sure.
And I have the documentation there, and one of them is on Bancroft over there.
Oh, the sandstone.
Yeah, which you said it should be monitored for those cracks and all that other kind of stuff. So perhaps we could take a look.
That's the big one with the urn on top.
Right.
That's a very dangerous. Don't go near that stone.
Yeah.
Is it assumed everything?
It's a big obelisk at the end of this tree, and it's called Bancroft, and it's got a good sized crack we're monitoring in the inscription stone, which is one of the stones down here holding up all. It's got an urn this big on top of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
But to just show you what I mean by danger. So when I go out and check a stone to see if it's loose or it's got metal pins, a lot of times, and I don't want you to do this, I put my leg up against there. I'm pretty strong for as little as I look, and kind of see if it's loose. I want you to only touch the stone and see if it's loose. I just want you to go. Because look. Ooh. Right?
yeah, yeah.
This one's ready to go.
Is that even attached to anything?
Nothing. Nothing. And if I got my level out, it's leaning back. And if you look, the gophers have been here.
Oh yeah.
And this ground wants to.
And it's off center.
If I step with any kind of weight here, I can make that tip back just enough to have that drop on my leg.
And it looks like layer 2. The middle one is pulling to
The plinth.
it's
It's not. It's
moving.
already moved off. See?
Yep.
I can get my.
Now,
finger
do we
on it.
assume anything
So
that's
that's-
layered it should have grout? Is that the
Yes.
assumption?
Yes, it should.
So probably none of them have grout. that you
But
can
some of
see.
these, I mean, this one's secure on here.
Yeah.
So you may not see grout, and if you take all of this stuff out, you might not see the grout a little bit. I also have, you know those, and I know I said metal is not good, but I have those little flags you stick in the ground for like, here's where the sewer line is, or here's where your electric line is. They have those little like orange flags up or something.
And blue for water.
You should not be able to slip one of those underneath here. And sometimes you can. Here's my popsicle.
So
Because
that
sometimes
means,
that gap is really big.
so that means we can't really tell unless it's moving whether there's
And that's why I'm
grout.
saying touch them lightly.
Yeah.
And watch where you're stepping when you do it, and just see. Does
So
that
that
move
would
a
be
little
obvious, no grout.
bit? No. Yes, and I don't think it's got. Now I'm going to do
So
my
this is
test.
what, 60, 70, 80 pounds?
It's got metal pins, so it's holding it. 70, 80 pounds.
80 pounds, 90.
You're going to make me do math.
I mean,
Marble is 145 pounds a cubic foot. That piece on top is probably, you know, a little more than a
little
cubic
over
foot.
140
oh,
pounds.
okay.
Yeah, so
Not good on
165, 180, somewhere in there. Yeah, just for that. Yeah.
and loose.
So you have to be careful and watch where you're standing in regards to these. So then the other thing is, I go sometimes and you can't read a stone and people they think I'm like magical, because it's like, oh, it says, in memory of Jane, you know, or better, Jerusha or Lucretia, you know, names you don't know, you wouldn't recognize. It's not letters, you're seeing L something. It's Lydia, Lucretia, it's names you aren't familiar with. Woman's name always says wife of underneath. You can get her last name by looking at the stone next to her. So she's wife of L.P. Weber. You can see it, but I'm guessing this is L.P. Yeah. So, you know, you can sometimes decipher the name off the stone next to it. It might say son of, it might say, sometimes the women's name, if you can find the daughter or son, it will list her name again, so you'll be able to like, oh yeah, it's Lucretia, it's Jerusha, it's, you know, submit, thankful, all kinds of crazy names that we don't use anymore. Most of them in here are, except when you get over into the really old section. There are some older ones back in there too,
Right.
but, you know, I think the names will be fairly familiar. But you'll learn after a while what it kind of says, you know, and then you'll be able to think, oh, okay, it says. But the light helps for reading, and some sort of reflective, or, like I said, noontime is bad because the sun's straight up and down, then it's too bright, you can't see it. So it's better later in the afternoon or earlier in the morning to try and read it. And then I will discuss how to clean a stone. So I travel around. You see the milk jugs in the back, and I just have water jugs that I carry with me because not all cemeteries have water in them. The water here is a little rusty.
At the moment, there is no water
Oh,
here.
there is no water, okay. But, so I dry brush it. I take my popsicle sticks. I get all this extra big stuff off. You could get all this, like, you know, dried up stuff off with the brush. You always start at the bottom up. People think, but then the clean part's gonna get dirty again. Yeah, but it's wet, it'll be fine. If you start at the top, you're gonna get a streak down the front of the dirt running through the dirt, and it won't come off. It'll stain it in this weird way. So I just work from the bottom up. I wash with water, and only water, my little soft brush. And I get the stone nice and wet. I might use 2 jugs of water to wet the stone. Then I have a bucket. I fill it halfway up with water. I just keep sticking that brush in there and just scrubbing and getting more water and scrubbing from the bottom up again, and then rinse it really good.
And
Little sticks help to pick into the lettering and stuff and get things off.
And it's important to remember the policy of the cemetery here, which is no one to clean any stones unless it's
yours.
Yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Tamara, can I ask what, are you tap water? Because I would not necessarily use tap water. Would you use distilled or spring water?
You know, I don't think I have to be that righteous. If you were cleaning a stone in, say, Florida, where you have a lot of sulfur and
Well, yeah, I was
salt
going
in
to
the
say
water,
that some towns have a lot
that
of
would
chemicals
be,
in their
yeah.
stones as well.
Basically, by the time I go, I fill my jugs at night when I come home, and it's basically distilled by morning, you know. Yeah. But no, it's fine. And I'm also going to pass out a little kit to everybody. And I don't get any money for this, but D2 was developed a few years ago. It's a biocide. It's not to clean the stone, but it's to kill this black stuff on here that looks like tar, that's thick as thick can be. That's a lichen. And there's no way to get it off. You can scrub it with water, you know, every day for a year. It's just, it's like tar. The lichen will kill it. It'll also turn your stone like hot pink or orange for a day, but when it dries, it comes back to its natural color. But it kills that lichen, and the lichens can get deep inside the stone. The stone's porous. So you'll clean it with water, you let it dry up a little bit, and then you spray this D2 on, and I say it's like they bleed out. They just start pouring this color out, and if you spray them a little more, they'll keep copper, brown, yellow, green. Different lichens come in different colors and cause different. Native Americans used to collect these and dye fabric with them. In fact, now a lot of like knitters and stuff will also collect them to dye wool. But so they change colors. They will stain your hands. You might want to have some gloves with you if you're going to do that. And just rinse it
That's what
really.
Arlington uses, isn't it, D2?
Pardon?
That's what Arlington National Cemetery.
Yes, they do. And the White House.
It's approved by everybody. There's a couple other things out there that are being promoted, and I just tried one of them, Prosecco, and I was really upset because I sprayed it on a slate stone and it bleached the bottom of the stone, and I have no idea why, because it's supposed to be safe.
But that wasn't here though, right?
No. That was on Martha's Vineyard. That's where I was last week.
So if we can't clean the stones, but if they're particularly heavily, if the wording is obscured by the lichens, what's the balance there?
Right. Well, I guess I ask Cliff and them if we can use. I love
like
to
that one over
John
there is
about
pretty-
using a dry brush.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the best thing that we can do at the moment is just best guess what the section and lot number is, And then,
It would be amazing if you get like these, and the marble are the hardest to read. But even,
well, careful.
like I said, a piece of foil on cardboard, something to catch the light, you can really make them go from unreadable to readable.
I used to just carry a mirror around with me.
Come look at this one for a minute.
A bathroom mirror.
Yeah,
This
and
big.
this is just nice because it doesn't break.
Oh, yeah, and you pull it up.
But you look at this and it's hard to read. Yeah.
Oh, it's a Stella.
Wow.
See?
Weber.
And if I would have bought flashlights not at the dollar store, they might have worked a little better. If it's a little darker, they work better too
Right.
to light that up. But you have to go more letter by letter to read it. But it's getting the shadow in there, and that's what really makes them.
Now, what is that called again? The circular.
The reflector?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just a collapsible photo reflector.
It's a Newer Real Color SKU 100000076.
There you go. It's
Copied it off the bag.
It's $15 off the internet. I'm sure you can find it pretty easy.
Right.
But that really that does a lot. And I grant you, there's going to be one of the stones I really want to talk to Cliff about is this angel way down here. You can't even see her right now. She's way limestone here. Okay, marble used to be limestone, which used to be little sea creatures that died and fell to the bottom of the old prehistoric ocean. That's limestone. If it gets pushed underground and it's heated and compressed, it changes into marble, right? So we have marble out here, but it depends on where you got it in the quarry, to how close to marble. If it's deep down in, it's good marble. If it's up on top, it's more like limestone. You put it out here with acid rain, it melts like soap in a shower. And that's why they're hard to read. We have the Grand Canyon because of limestone. It's one of the hardest rocks. It's the top layer of the Grand Canyon. Without it, it all would have just melted away and it looked like the Mississippi River. Yeah. So, it's people ask me sometimes, well, if I clean a stone, how long will it stay clean? I said, where is it? And they'll be like, Cincinnati. And I'm like, no, is it under a tree? Is it next to sprinklers? Is it got,
Shade.
lots of shade.
Right.
Air circulation is really the big thing. When they trimmed up all these trees here, they did wonders for the stones underneath. Because the air circulation is not just the shade. They can be in shade from a tree, but if they're and then pine sap, all kinds of things add to that. And trees let out like 5 or 6 different things. There's a pollen, there's a little fuzzy thing, there's a seed, there's a, from acorns to the little whirly wings. But in the spring, they let out all these other things. And there's this one that's turns brown and will get all over your car. You hate it if it's a white car. And it's these little fuzzy tail things, and they'll land on your car. I think it's off a maple tree or poplar or something. And they're horrible. They're really horrible on a marble stone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a big difference. Where it is, what it's about.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, all those back in there are covered with this red stuff. And they haven't quite, I don't know enough about lichens to know that's a whole other field.
Yeah.
You just don't like it.
Like them? I don't like them. Like them? Heck, I don't need them. Yeah.
A lot of times relatives show up.
Oh, right. So sometimes when I'm out here, relatives show up and they're visiting their grave sites, and they'll come and ask me to clean their stone or something, and I have to tell them to request it through DCR. But if we, get a list together and move forward on it, I think people will want things done.
So we should put that in a newsletter and put it on Facebook.
Yeah. And then you can,
Yeah.
but give them a
form to
form to
Yeah.
sign.
Which
So
will
they can
which
get
we'll work on that form this week. Have that done as soon as we possibly can with DCR
Yeah.
to make sure that we're satisfying their requirement.
Right.
And that everyone's covered safely.
Right, right. Yeah, and safety, safety, safety.
Safety.
Be safe, be safe.